It feels like being stabbed in the soul while someone smiles in your face. That's the cruel paradox of betrayal, especially when it comes from the person you trusted most. When a woman cheats, she rarely does it silently. She does it through words, carefully chosen, deceptively ordinary phrases that cut deeper than any blade. She leaves trails of language disguised as concern, as distance, as misplaced honesty. These phrases are not casual. They're calculated. They're part of a hidden script. And if you fail to see through them, if you can't decipher what's being whispered behind the mask, you risk walking headfirst into emotional slaughter without even realizing what's happening. Infidelity almost never begins in bed. That's a common misconception, a comforting lie we tell ourselves. In reality, it starts much earlier. It starts in conversation. In that one sentence that sounds innocent, but actually marks the first crack in the foundation. A phrase that doesn't look dangerous on the surface, yet carries within it the seed of betrayal. The tragedy is that most men don't notice it until it's far too late. Many even help justify it, unknowingly becoming accomplices in their own undoing. That's why today I want to reveal the 5 phrases that almost inevitably show up when a woman is cheating. By understanding them, by recognizing what lies behind each word, you won't just decode her intentions. You'll protect your dignity before your soul gets torn apart. The final phrase is the most lethal. If you don't catch it in time, it can leave you emotionally wrecked, disoriented, and stripped of your self-respect. But before we reach that devastating conclusion, we must walk through the progression, one step at a time, so you can see how betrayal usually unfolds. My name is Karen, and if you've ever felt broken inside, if you've ever wondered why your trust turned into a weapon against you, this message is for you. I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here to equip you for emotional survival. Think back. Have you ever been told you've changed right before everything in your relationship began to collapse? That's no coincidence. It's not a random observation. It's a carefully chosen dagger disguised as honesty, but loaded with intent. Because when a woman wants to justify her infidelity, she doesn't begin by asking for forgiveness. She doesn't even begin by confessing. She begins by pointing the finger at you. The opening line is almost always, "You're not the same man you used to be." That's the first phrase you must recognize for what it truly is. That phrase doesn't come out of nowhere. It arrives after weeks, sometimes months, of subtle shifts. You notice small changes, shorter conversations, eyes that avoid yours, affection that evaporates without explanation. Something in the air feels wrong, but you can't put your finger on it. Then, one day, you confront her. You ask what's going on, and that's when she delivers the line. "You're just not the man I fell in love with anymore." At first it sounds reflective, maybe even reasonable, but it's not. It's not a reflection, it's an excuse. It's a weapon dressed as insight. Here's what really happens. By saying you've changed, she subtly transfers the responsibility onto you, as if the cracks in the relationship are your fault, as if her shifting desire, her hidden double life, can be justified by your supposed transformation. It's psychological sleight of hand, because while you're busy looking inward, wondering where you went wrong, she's already giving her time and body to someone else. And the cruelest trick? If you believe it, if you take the bait, you start apologizing for things you didn't even do. You begin changing who you are, not out of genuine growth, but out of desperation to win her back. What you're really doing is losing yourself, piece by piece, while she quietly disappears into another man's arms. Let me paint you a picture I've seen play out countless times. A man in his 60s, a decent man, hardworking, faithful, and present as a husband. He comes home and notices his wife doesn't look at him with the warmth she once did. He feels the distance. He sees the glow of her phone occupying her attention instead of his presence. Eventually, his intuition demands clarity. He asks, gently but firmly, Is something wrong between us? She looks him directly in the eye and replies, "You've changed. You're not the man I fell in love with." And in that moment, his world tilts. Instead of recognizing the manipulation, he drowns in guilt. He reviews everything he stopped doing, every flaw he thinks he might have developed. He shoulders responsibility for a failure that was never his. What he doesn't realize is that while he's busy rebuilding his self-esteem from the rubble, another man is already waiting for her after work. Understand this clearly. "You're not the same anymore" is not an innocent observation. It's a strategy, a setup. When a woman wants to justify the unjustifiable, she needs you to feel guilty. She needs you to believe that somehow her betrayal is a response to your inadequacy. That way, if you ever catch her, she is no longer the unfaithful one. You are the man who pushed her to it. And here's the bitter irony. Many times, you didn't change at all. You simply aged. You lost the sparkle of novelty. You became familiar, predictable. And because she knows your habits, your silences, your weaknesses, it's easier to pin the blame on you than to confront her own dissatisfaction. Don't let anyone convince you that you are not enough. If a woman wants to leave, let her leave. But do not allow her to drag you into the abyss with her poisoned narrative. Because the truth is not that you changed, it's that she no longer loves you. And to soothe her own conscience, to escape judgment from others and herself, she needs a scapegoat. More often than not, that scapegoat is you. If you don't see it coming, this strategy will shatter you. And once you're left alone, replaying that phrase over and over, "You're not the same anymore," you'll begin to believe that everything started with you. That's when the second weapon comes into play, disguised as independence but powered by silence. The second phrase you must watch out for is, "I need time for myself." At first glance, it seems harmless. After all, who doesn't need space every now and then? But timing is everything. When that phrase appears right after weeks of coldness, after criticism aimed directly at you, after her withdrawal has become impossible to ignore, it's not about growth. It's a smokescreen, a polished lie wrapped in the language of self-care. What she's really saying, without saying it, is, "I need time away from you, with someone else." This is where psychology offers clarity. In truth, it's a projection and avoidance mechanism. She doesn't want to face the discomfort of telling you the truth. She doesn't want to admit to her lack of commitment, her unresolved desires, or her secret emotional bond with another man. So instead, she hands you this phrase, perfectly packaged, "I need to find myself." It sounds noble, it sounds unselfish, but it's nothing of the sort. And here's where many men fall into the trap. At 50, 60, 70 years old, you don't need to be sent into an emotional corner like a misbehaving child. You don't need vague speeches about finding oneself. What you need is honesty, clarity, respect. But what you get instead is ambiguity. Because behind that phrase, 9 times out of 10, there's already a third person in the picture. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, once said, "Don't worry about what you can't control." That's precisely the wisdom required here. Her decision to hide, to retreat into half-truths, is not in your control. But your response, that is entirely yours. You can choose to buy into the narrative, to wait like a prisoner serving time while she finds herself. You can put your life on hold, stay emotionally frozen, and hope she returns when she's done playing out her story. Or you can reclaim your center. You can stop begging for answers from someone who has already given you the clearest one of all, disregard. Because that's what "I need time" really means in this context. It's not a request for personal growth. It's a soft dismissal, a way to push you aside without accepting responsibility. It's pressing pause on your life so she can test the waters elsewhere. And if it doesn't work out, She might come back as though nothing ever happened, expecting you to welcome her as if your dignity hadn't been eroded in the process. Understand this: when someone asks for space at the very moment you most need connection, they're not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. They're seeking a clean exit, or at the very least, a backup plan. Don't give them the luxury of waiting. Don't confuse your patience for respect when it's really just self-betrayal. Time given to someone who doesn't value you is time stolen from yourself, time you could be using to heal, to rediscover your worth, to rebuild a life with someone who sees the value in a man who has lived, who has fought, who has earned respect. Life is not a rehearsal. You are not at an age to waste years waiting for someone who is already checked out. The truth, when hidden behind ambiguity, is far more dangerous than a direct lie. That's why the first two phrases, "You've changed and I need time," are the opening moves in a devastating game. They create guilt, confusion, and paralysis. But the game doesn't stop there. It escalates into even darker territory. And that brings us to the third phrase. It sounds vulnerable, almost honest, but it's pure poison. It's the phrase that leaves you stuck in emotional limbo, unable to move forward, unable to let go. I don't know what I want. When the words fall from her lips, I don't know what I want, they rarely come as a spontaneous confession of uncertainty. Instead, they arrive as a carefully chosen tactic, a way of keeping you suspended in midair, neither fully with her nor free from her. It is the invisible rope around your chest, tying you to her indecision, leaving you waiting for an answer that will almost never arrive. This phrase is devastating because of its ambiguity. It sounds vulnerable, even genuine, as if she is baring her soul, but in reality, it is a calculated maneuver designed to give her maximum freedom with minimum accountability. By telling you she is confused, she stops you from moving forward, but she doesn't release you either. She leaves you stranded in an emotional purgatory, unable to make decisions for yourself, while she quietly explores her options. And here is the hardest truth to swallow. In most cases, she already knows exactly what she wants, but she doesn't have the courage or the honesty to say it aloud. This phrase isn't vulnerability. It's control. It isn't confusion. It's manipulation. By telling you she doesn't know what she wants, she places you in the role of caretaker, the one who must wait patiently, lovingly, while she figures things out. But in reality, the figuring out often happens in another man's arms. The longer you wait, the deeper the damage. You give her your time, your emotional energy, your patience, all while starving yourself of the clarity and respect you deserve. Many men fall into this trap because they believe patience is a virtue, that waiting is a sign of love. But patience in this context is not love. It is self-destruction. It is allowing yourself to be used as an emotional safety net while she indulges her double life. The way out is deceptively simple, but brutally powerful. Demand clarity. Not through begging, shouting, or accusations, but through quiet, unshakable dignity. Look her in the eye and say, "If you don't know what you want, I know what I deserve." That sentence changes everything. It pulls you out of her game and places you back into control of your own life. It communicates that her confusion is not your prison. She may hesitate, she may cry, she may accuse you of being cold, but what you are really doing is protecting yourself from months or even years of slow emotional decay. By demanding clarity, you shift the burden. You are no longer the man waiting for scraps of attention. You are the man who knows his value and refuses to let it be diminished. Think of it like standing at a train station. She has one foot on your train and the other still on the platform. She won't step on completely, but she won't step off either. And as long as she stays in this limbo, you cannot move forward. Your train is stuck, your life is stalled, and your dignity is suspended in the air. By demanding clarity, you are not pushing her off the train. You are asking her to choose. And if she refuses, then you know what you must do. You close the door, you sound the whistle, and you move on because you know where you are going. And you don't have the time or energy to carry passengers who don't. Many men, unfortunately, make the worst mistake at this stage. They wait. They tell themselves that waiting is proof of loyalty, that patience will be rewarded, that eventually she will come back. But the longer you wait, the weaker you become, and the more power you hand over to her. The poison of indecision eats away at your spirit until you no longer recognize yourself. By the time she finally admits the truth, whether it is that she doesn't love you, that she's with someone else, or that she simply wants out, you are left shattered, hollowed, and resentful. Don't fall into that trap. Confusion is not an excuse to put your life on pause. If the first 3 phrases, "You've changed," "I need time for myself," and "I don't know what I want," are the opening maneuvers in the game of betrayal, the 4th phrase is the desperate defense, the attempt to cover tracks when the mask begins to slip. This is the moment when your intuition, honed over decades of life, begins to shout louder than her excuses. You start noticing inconsistencies, the late-night phone calls, the unexplained absences, the sudden secrecy. And when you confront her, when you finally demand answers, she deploys the velvet-coated dagger. It's not what you think. This phrase is diabolical because it doesn't deny and it doesn't confirm. It hovers in the gray space, sowing doubt, clouding your judgment. Instead of offering clarity, it attacks your perception. It suggests that you are misinterpreting, that you are paranoid, that you are insecure. And because no man wants to feel paranoid or insecure, you start doubting yourself instead of her. That is the most dangerous trap of all. You betray your own instincts. You choose to believe the softer version of reality rather than face the painful truth staring you in the face. But here's the lesson. When your gut tells you something is wrong, trust it. Your intuition is not paranoia. It is wisdom accumulated over a lifetime. The mistake most men make is silencing that inner voice because they would rather preserve the appearance of stability than confront the chaos of truth. At a certain age, after decades of working, building, enduring, the last thing you want is conflict. You don't want to burn down your home or your life. So when she says, "It's not what you think," you cling to it like a lifeline, desperate to preserve the illusion of peace. But that lifeline is rotten. Hold on too long, and it will drag you under. The consequences of believing this phrase are devastating. Not only are you betrayed, but you become the guardian of the lie itself. You live in a house where respect has already departed, but you convince yourself to stay because you fear the alternative. You tell yourself it's easier to swallow doubt than to face the wound. But in doing so, you give up the most sacred right you have, the right to see clearly. And once that clarity is gone, you are no longer living in truth. You are living in a fabricated narrative, one in which you are complicit. The antidote is brutal honesty. Don't negotiate with the obvious. If something feels wrong, if your instinct screams at you, don't bury it under rationalizations. Don't ignore the signs. The truth, even when it burns, is always cleaner than the lie that corrodes you slowly. Remember this. It's not what you think is not about protecting you. It's about protecting her from the consequences of her actions. But you are not her shield. You are not her scapegoat. You are a man with a right to dignity and truth. And if the truth destroys the relationship, then the relationship was already gone. Now we arrive at the final phrase, the most devastating, the one that can enslave your spirit if you let it. It arrives casually, almost gently in the middle of an argument or a difficult conversation. You've changed too. At first it sounds balanced, even fair, but in reality, it is the final verdict. It is the ultimate reversal. With those 3 words, the entire weight of betrayal is shifted from her shoulders onto yours. Suddenly, you are not the victim of infidelity. You are the cause of it. She is no longer the one who broke trust. You are the man who forced her hand. This phrase is insidious because it offers no escape. If you protest, you prove her point. If you stay silent, you appear guilty. Either way, the blame sticks to you. And the tragedy is that many men believe it. After years of routine, responsibilities, stress, and exhaustion, they start to wonder if maybe they did change. Maybe they did become less exciting, less attentive, less romantic. They internalize the accusation, and instead of holding their heads high, they bow them. They begin working frantically to become the man they used to be, not out of genuine desire, but out of desperation to win back someone who has already moved on. The damage of believing this phrase is catastrophic. You lose not only her respect, but your own. You begin living on your knees, begging for crumbs of attention, reshaping your personality to please someone who has no intention of being pleased. You alter how you dress, how you talk, how you carry yourself, not out of confidence, but out of fear. You become a shadow, a hollow echo of the man you once were. And that is the greatest tragedy of all, not losing her, but losing yourself. But there is a way out, and it begins with one decision. Stop looking outside for the validation that only you can give yourself. If you know who you are, if you know your worth, then no one can use your past or your growth as a weapon against you. Respect is not something you beg for. It is something you command through presence, boundaries, and quiet certainty. You don't need to shout. You don't need to fight. You simply need to make it clear. If someone wants to be with you, it must be in truth. If not, they can step aside. Yes, you've changed. Of course you have. You've lived, you've endured, you've carried burdens, and you've matured. That's not a weakness. That's the mark of a man with a story. Anyone who uses your growth as an excuse to betray you does not love you. They are using you. And the question you must ask yourself with unflinching honesty is this: how much longer will you allow someone to manipulate you with your own past? Because if you keep walking down that path, all you will harvest is frustration, dependency, and a lifetime of feeling less than you are. You weren't born for that. You were born to walk with dignity, to live with your head high, to face the world as a man who knows his worth. And that begins the moment you stop making excuses for someone who let you down. The moment you accept that someone who blames you to justify their betrayal has already forfeited their place in your story. That is when you reclaim your life. That is when the game ends. If you've made it this far, it means you've had the courage to face truths that many people would rather ignore. It's not easy to admit that you've been manipulated, that someone you trusted used your dignity as a shield for their own failures. But facing that truth is the first step toward freedom. Because as long as you keep justifying the unjustifiable, you will continue losing the most precious thing you have, your self-respect. Today, you've seen the 5 phrases that so often disguise betrayal. They are not casual remarks. They are calculated maneuvers. And the purpose of hearing them laid bare is not to make you bitter or hopeless, but to open your eyes. This isn't about comfort. It's about awakening. Because every phrase you've read is also a choice. You can keep waiting, keep justifying, keep believing lies, or you can step into truth, however painful, and begin rebuilding your life on a foundation of dignity. So I leave you with this declaration. Write it down. Speak it aloud. Carve it into your heart. My dignity comes first. Because that sentence is more than a mantra. It is a line in the sand. It is the refusal to be manipulated, the refusal to be diminished, the refusal to wait on pause for someone who doesn't see your worth. And if you hold to that line, no betrayal, no lie, no poisoned phrase will ever have the power to break you again.